Faces of light around me, help me if you please. Faces of light around me, take the shaker right out of my knees. Faces of light around me, just helping me to stand fast. Faces of light around me, just helping the terror to pass.
All right, so welcome everyone tonight. Welcome to the Exchange on beautiful Main Street in beautiful downtown Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. We are here tonight to talk about a place and a community, the Roaring Creek Valley. It's just over there. Bloomsburg has many communities within it and surrounding it. The Roaring Creek Valley has a conservation association which is dedicated to that place and the preservation of that place. All of Columbia County has bits and pieces of things like this. It's so important in a rural area that people care, that they do the work to preserve the things that we love about this area. If development pressure ever reaches us the way it has hit Lancaster County, say, we're not really ready. We could be so easily overrun. So it is so important to have these conversations. Why do we love this place? What is it that we love? What is it that we need to preserve? The Roaring Creek Valley, you can go online and find a map of what this area includes. It includes Weiser State Forest, it includes Knoebels, it includes Rohrbachs, on down to the Susquehanna River. When we put out the call for artwork, you can see surrounding us in the gallery here artwork that speaks to this region, the things about this region that people love, the places within it, the people within it. We asked artists to think about the Roaring Creek Valley and its surrounding areas in terms of a very broad definition of community. I had last winter had the opportunity to talk to a couple of people in North Carolina who had met a Cherokee, a Native American who speaks about the Cherokee idea of community. The Cherokee word for community, which I will not try to pronounce, includes not just the people, but the animals, the plants, the mountains, the sky. It's all part of that. This show speaks to the Roaring Creek Valley in that way, that broad way. And I have one quick story about a person from the Roaring Creek Valley, Denise Bosworth at Rohrbachs. Years ago, in 2014, after the fire at the Moose Exchange, we needed a way to celebrate Halloween in this town. We had done events in that space, now we didn't have that space. The idea arose of doing a street festival at the YMCA with the Children's Museum and Agape, which was right across the street. We would do something there, get everyone together for Halloween. I had this idea that the best way to celebrate Halloween is to throw pumpkins off a fire truck, off a ladder truck. Where do you get pumpkins? You go to Rohrbachs and you say to Denise, I need pumpkins to throw off a ladder truck. And she says, sure. So every year since then, we go over there in October, she gives us a whole bunch of pumpkins, the fire truck shows up on 7th Street, and now the volunteer firefighters do the work. The first year I got to do it, which is great. In 2020, we couldn't do that event. We couldn't invite a whole bunch of people, but I still wanted to mark Halloween. So I asked the fire chief, can we simply bring the ladder truck out into the parking lot of the fire hall? He said, sure! And he and his wife helped toss them. It's great. But I still needed pumpkins, so I went over to Rohrbachs. And properly socially distant, Denise and I were out there in the field picking pumpkins. And she said, you know what? We really should do an art show that talks about the farm. That became Art Grows on the Farm. In 2021, we invited people to come out to Rohrbachs over the course of the year, draw, paint, take photographs. And in the fall, an art show went up here and there, inspired by that farm. We did it again in 2023. We're doing it again this year. The collaboration between that farm and this gallery is one of the things that makes this place successful, and it's one of the things that speaks to the community of the Roaring Creek Valley. We now have Dan and Mary Rose to talk more about that community.
Hello, Dan.
Well, hello, Mary Luby. Thank you for getting me in this predicament.
I want to introduce Dan to everyone. He is the president of the Roaring Creek Valley Conservation Association. and he is the driving force that keeps our organization together. And we wanted to talk about some of the things that we have done growing up as kids in the Roaring Creek Valley, and how it was then, and say maybe how it is now. And so do you have any fond memories from growing up as a kid?
I have many. I could talk all night probably about them.
Would you like to tell us about some of them?
I will. I want to say this is Mary Rose, and she's our secretary. And without her, we wouldn't have this art show either, because she helped put all this together. And she does a great job at projecting our
Thank you.
organization out there.
I love art,
Thanks.
and I think it's a great way to express what goes on in the community, and it involves nature, it involves people, it's conservation of the land and the water. And anyway, let's go back to fond memories.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll talk, because I grew up on a small farm in Cleveland Township, which my father bought probably in 1950. It was like 105 acres. He paid like $4,800 for it back then. And there were plenty of farms around for sale at that time, which was a lot of money. It took him years to pay it off. But I remember like always being a little kid, always following him around the farm, because he's a great dad. We did everything together. Go to church on Sunday, then it was time to play the rest of the day. You'd go drive back to the woods in an old truck, play baseball. I remember he built a pond, we learned to swim in that. You know, we were always like, in the morning, as soon as we could, we'd have to go out and help milk the cows. And then my mother, she would make butter, put it in the old wooden print, and we'd sell it to the neighbors. I remember walking to the neighbors to take our butter there. But it was an old wooden, like a 5-gallon thing. You would crank it by hand to make the butter. And we had the separator too, and we got, which was a big cast iron thing with a big bowl. You pour your milk in there and separate the cream from the milk. And I was just growing up on the farm, but there was always something to do. We did our own butchering, but there was always a lot of playtime too. We're always in the woods growing up as a kid, so I got to appreciate nature, the animals, and really respect them a lot, because it's part of like who you are, I think, when you respect nature, you know. And that was always a fond memory. And then my sister came along, younger, because I always remember, I was so small, and we were in the barn, and my dad said to my brother and I, Wayne, "Oh, you're going to have a little sister. Your mother's in the hospital." I said, "Well, how's that happen?" Because I didn't know anything about it. And he always said a stork is bringing it.
Of course.
You know, and at the time I thought, well, yeah, it's impossible for a person to bring a little baby. But I always remember him telling stories like that to us. But he was a great guy, and where he grew up was near Roaring Creek too, and he used to farm with mules and so on like that. And just led us a very simple life. A guy that never worried about anything, easygoing. Always wanted to be like him in some ways. You know, just an easygoing guy. But I always remember like living on a farm. That's why I never moved away there. I mean, I've traveled some, but home was home. It was always good to get back home, you know. And where my house is nestled in the woods where you can't see anyone else. It looks like a goat path going to a. But I love going back through the woods and seeing the trees. And every morning there's animals down in the fields, and you know. So I got involved in all that. That's what got me involved in nature and helping preserve nature and trying to take care of and trying to get others interested. Because sometimes it's sad to see not a lot of people are really, they just drive by something on the road, and like Molly and I, if we see a turtle, we make sure we slam on the brakes and get it off the road. You know, because that's in the watershed and all that, and it's important. You know, we had some raccoons in our barn the other day. I think there was 5 of them in the corn barrel. You know, looking up, and somehow they managed to get the lids off. And then you try to get them out, and of course they growl and carry on at you. But it's like, it's just neat to be around that. And so many people miss that. In the cities, they never saw things like that. And it's nice to get the word out there. And I think our organization tries to educate if we can. We do like some water monitoring and so on when we can. But we try to educate and have some nice discussions after our meetings about that. But but growing up in a farm, I always remember like throwing the hay bales when we had to bale by hand, pick it off the ground, throw it in the hay mouse, and then we'd help all the neighbors with their baling and so on like that. And every neighbor knew the other neighbor. Like every neighbor was kind of self-independent. You had your own little farm, your own little food, grew your own vegetables. It was a simple way of life. But now things have changed. Like most of the people, you don't really know their background or where they came from or anything anymore. Yeah. And I remember instances like our neighbor had a windmill, which is still in use today. And I remember working out there growing up as a little kid. And we had to paint this windmill one day, and a friend of mine, Mike Palachuk, we'd climb to the top, we'd take turns, and we'd sit on this little platform and try to hope one guy would hold the brake so it wouldn't swing around. And we had a paintbrush tied to a stick, reaching out, painting the veins and so on. And it was just a neat way of life, how that's all they ever used. And because I remember Mike getting froze up there, and I had to climb up, get his feet to get him back on the ladder. And of course, at the time, the water was pumped to a reservoir in a hill. And then when I was young, I'd go up and we'd take the lid off, drain it, and climb down in there, scrub it down with Clorox, and get it nice and clean, because there was even snakes in it. Actually, it was one of the last times I drank water there. Well, and we used to help, like, pick potatoes, and you'd call your number out all the time, and you got your own little cash, which if you only had, like, a handful of dollar bills, it was so exciting. You had the money you got it yourself back then. See how much you could make at the time. And on the farm, there was always work to do. We were always like busy working. And speaking of water there, that was an old hand-dug well, which is still there. And it's so unique. It's probably like 40 feet deep, circled with rock. But as it goes down, it gets like a light bulb chiseled out of solid stone. And I remember my dad going down there on a rope and that's small. And the guy who lowered him only had one arm on the rope. And I thought he's never going to come back up. But he had to go down and clean and stuff like that, but everything went fine. And we just did crazy stuff. My dad left us to do a lot of crazy things in the valley. You know, we weren't like growing up being like sheltered or don't do this, don't do that. You learn to drive a tractor, and it was just a neat time of life. And I look back on that, and I wish it was still like that, because the hustle and bustle of today is just zoom, 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 so fast. Like everything's like fast motion, time's just flying, which kind of sad that it happens like that. But I always like walk through the woods and just enjoying. It's a nice valley out there. There's a lot of history out in the valley. There's some like old Quaker meeting house. There's an old stone house at Klinger's Farm Market. It's supposed to be one of the oldest stone houses in the valley, which is falling down now. But so it's just so cool, because I remember working, as a carpenter, and I thought, wow, this is neat. I had the old wooden fireplaces and surrounds, but all that stuff is like slowly disappearing out there. And I'll let Mary Rose talk a little bit while
Do you want a drink of water?
No, yeah, I have my back. I have one in the back that's open there. So.
There you go.
But there's a lot to talk about how when you grow up as a child.
And I remember growing up on a farm. I was one of 7 children, and my dad started off as a farmer, and he eventually, he couldn't really make a living being a farmer with 7 children, so he worked as a truck driver for Fulmer Trucking for many years, and then later on he became a pilot. But he planted tomatoes on our farm, and that was, I think, the first time I ever saw a black person. And they came to pick the tomatoes, and then they lived in a neighbor's, a farmer that had a migrant camp, and their children would go on the school bus. I think I remember hearing you mention seeing the black kids riding the bus,
Yeah.
and it was migrant farm workers' children that were going along to school while their parents were out working. And as time went on, like, we had so much fun on the farm because we had a combine and it made hay, so we would have the old tractor pull the wagon, and my brothers would throw the hay up on the wagon, and then we would stack it and then take it to the barn and get it all unloaded. And after we were done doing that, we could go swimming in the pond because it was very hot and the hay was very prickly. But it was a good way to cool off. And my father planted sweet corn, and we had 2 mini bikes, and we would take turns riding the mini bikes, going down to the field, picking the corn, coming back, stocking our stand along the road, and selling sweet corn. And at the end of the week, if we made enough money, all of us children would go to Knoebels Grove and get our hand stamp to ride all the rides on Friday night. So it was a great way to learn about business and not know you were learning about business, and also to be responsible so you could kind of work for a goal and achieve Knoebels, which was great. And then later on, my father, there was a airmail strip on our farm, and it had been closed, but he reopened it as a grass landing field. So he often flew, and usually every Sunday for about 2 years, I would go with him on his single-engine 2-seater plane and go somewhere in Pennsylvania and just go out for the day and have fun flying with Dad. And he eventually went on and got his commercial license, and he had his own, like a Beechcraft airplane, and he had that for a couple years. And then my mother became involved with the migrant farm workers and helping them to kind of get better living conditions and have a better way of life. And she did that for her career as a paralegal, and she traveled to any state where there were migrant farm workers working on the East Coast. So she eventually ended up in Florida, and she worked with sugarcane workers. But that was her life, and so it was very interesting growing up on the farm and then being exposed to kind of like the world through my parents and getting to know how to survive.
Yeah, and I think there were 2 migrant camps in our area local. There was one out by where Nor's farm is, down in there, and then there was
Perry
one.
Nor,
And then there's one over by Fisherdale. There was a town called Fisherdale. There was.
and there was one at Swiderski's too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were nice people. They were really hard workers back then. I mean, people would kind of judge them a little bit, but they were really hard, honest to God workers. That's all they knew. That's how they made their living. But it was great. And they were thankful we had them back then, because my father used to raise tomatoes too. I actually had some of the best tomatoes one time in Columbia County. And our soil is nothing but rocks. If you walked on our farm, you think, how can that thing possibly grow here? But it grows really good.
He
That's
raised
surprised.
number 9 tomatoes, and he
Yeah.
asked him, he said, well, how do you get a 10?
Yeah.
And they said, well, if you figure out how to raise them without the stem, you'll get a 10.
Yeah. And it's kind of neat at our farm. I often wonder too, you know, like you go get a drink, there were springs there that were walled up. Whoever walled them up, they were walled up ages ago. I was kind of curious who walled these up in the middle of nowhere. You know, now they're overgrowing briars, but, and I have found some Indian artifacts on our farm, which is kind of interesting, because I always grew up looking for them, never could find one. And finally, my grandfather gave me a collection before he passed away. They came from down by Southern Area High School, I think, with hatchets and adze and arrowheads. And then I started getting the idea how to pick them out easy, and took some courses at college in anthropology. And I could start finding them. It was very interesting. One time my brother shot at a deer and missed it. We weren't looking for his arrow on the farm. And he found his arrow, and right laying next to his arrow was an arrow point from a deer. And I
Wow.
thought, you know, what's the chances of that happening? You know? And I remember the neighbor in back of us, he used to be farmland there, it was over the pines. He used to cut down the pine trees, and then they'd ship them to the mines. They were like jack pine, and use them for props to hold up the coal mines. And that's how he made a living back in there. And there was a hollow back that they called Oil Well Hollow. I never quite figured out what that meant. It was kind of interesting in the background. But there's always stuff around that you found, and I used to love looking at rocks. My life was rocks. I enjoy rocks. So, and always looking for old mines and under outcroppings and fossils and bottles too. Dug through old dumps for old bottles years ago. But there's always something to do there in Roaring Creek. And I like going over in Weiser Forest. That has a lot of history too. A lot of it I don't know, but I know there's some old homesteads over there. We hike to, and the old walls are there yet. And they're just like they're in better shape than some walls today yet with no homes. And then over there too, back where we go monitoring, there's a road there called a corduroy road,
Yes.
where it's just trees laying where the swamp is. And they were put in there like probably 100 years ago. And from being in the moisture like that, just never rotted because they don't get the air. It's just some neat areas. So, hit it there. I'll get it.
Well, with growing up and seeing a lot of the old structures on farms, they seem like today all the old wooden barns are disappearing and falling down. So as being an artist, I've tried to capture some of what is still left. And so we have an interest in art, and so we decided it would be nice to do art of the Roaring Creek Valley to include areas that are in our watershed. And like there's a painting of one of our members, John Slaughterback, in the Weiser Forest in the fall. That's right there. And there's other paintings of old barns and some of the creatures from the watershed, like the red newt and box turtle. And there's even a picture of us doing water sampling. We take samples of the headwaters and keep records of how the pH and the different qualities of the water, and see if there's any changes so that we know if there's any disturbances or something going on that would pollute the water. So we do that, and we always have a great time when we get together. We have a foot race in the forest, the Hellbender 5K, and we welcome new members if there's anyone that you know that would be interested. We go on hikes. There's an old miners trail that goes from the Roaring Creek watershed over the Natalie Mountain. And there is even a bat cave on top of the mountain that we're planning a hike to go visit that.
To explore that. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Then there was an old mine shaft where they say you can throw a rock down and never hear it hit the bottom. So I have to check this out.
And this is a painting of an old truck that was used for mining coal that someone found on the Roaring Creek Mountain, I guess up on the Natalie Mountain, when they were mountain biking. And so that turned into a painting. And we just like the thought of preserving nature and keeping it as long as we can, because it seems like many areas are losing the aspect of like clean water, and trees are being cut down. And so just to promote our area, to keep nature fresh and try to keep it, like stay active with nature so we can follow the trends and kayak on the water. And
We do like a moonlight kayak on that full moon. Over in the watershed, a group of us get together and wait for the moon to come up. One time it never came up, so we just left. It was on the other side of the mountain too much. So,
In the winter ice skating.
yeah, where we go ice skating there, and we always have an annual outdoor gathering in the wintertime at the lake with hot dogs and
The summer picnic.
cross-country ski
Freeze
around
to
the lake.
death, but have a good time.
So. And I was going to show that picture of the two. And this is an old, going off to another story, this is a picture of our old farm that an artist from Leesburg did, Ferris Bradley. And, you know, it's not fixed up, but you know what, it has character. It's neat looking at an old barn. When you look at the
Usually
beams
there's a
and-
cat in there where the floor's missing on guard.
Yeah. And when you look at it
It's
like,
still there, home to 14 goats.
Cat.
yeah, and it's made out of old hand-hewed beams, some of them are just sawn on one side with the bark on. So it's been there quite a while.
How old do you think the barn is?
My neighbor who I used to work for said it's like over 100 years old,
Wow.
or more than that now.
Well, yeah. you
That was a
said
long time ago, she
100,
told me
right?
that.
Yeah.
So, and then behind me, there's some pictures of, if you can see them. This is an old smokehouse on the farm, which my father used to smoke his own meats, which was quite a chore back then, because you had to keep the smoke going and you couldn't let it burst into a flame or get too hot and ruin the meat and start cooking it. So he'd always go out and say, I gotta go build smoke. And we always used sassafras, so you'd stack it there and you put this metal covering over it so it could only smolder and smolder and smolder. It actually turned to charcoal than the wood did, but it smoked the meat really good. And eventually it cured it where you could keep it for months, because we did ham and dried beef and all that. Yeah. Some memorable days. Sometimes when you're a kid, you think, this is too much work. But now it wasn't. You know, when you look back, it was good days. You can't complain. Well, you can, but I'm not going to. So,
Yeah, I remember my father saying all the kids in the neighborhood would start the furthest one away, and they would start walking to school. And as they passed each house, and some new children would join in, and they would walk to school and walk home from school, and he said, and it was uphill both ways.
Always in the snow, 6 inches.
Yes, and we had a lot of snow in those days, which we don't see so much anymore.
you know, we used to go to school. There was no bus going where we were at the time when we were kids. We went to elementary school in New Media. We had to walk to the neighbors, which is a half mile. And then she was a teacher, so we rode with her out. And then on the way home, they didn't call school off. We'd have to get out of the car. We were just young down grade school, push to get back home sometimes like that. But it wasn't like it was today. If it snows a little, you're off. But it was fun. It was like a lot of fun. So,
Could you
Yeah.
say a little bit, Dan, about the house you grew up in?
the house, yeah, it was like the house we grew up in was an old plank house, double plank, just wood siding at the time. And all we had in it was an old kitchen stove. And in back of the stove, there was like a water tank, and the water from the kitchen stove heated down the tank. That's how we had our water. And then my mother would bake in this old stove too, because we didn't have gas stove at the time. And then in the room, the living room, we just had a heat roller. And all this heat would go up through and heat the upstairs. And then sometimes I remember being so cold, like the ice would actually freeze in a jar or glass by the window. It's cold like that. But we always had heavy quilts that was handmade, so it stayed pretty warm. And it was just unique. And the house still has a dirt floor. And my dad said they used to hang their meats down there. And in the barn, there's a place called a granary. And they used to hang hams. You'd hang hams in there, and they'd keep them for the longest time. Even if there was mold on, you just cut it off and eat it. You know.
Remember, we used to bring the jeans off the clothesline and bring them in and stand them on the floor by the heater?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were
Frozen
frozen
solid.
solid. And we had an outhouse. It took us a while to get indoor plumbing.
Yeah, we didn't have indoor plumbing.
We always had an old outhouse, and it was like the history, like the Sears catalog book at times.
It's under a mug upstairs.
Yeah, but it was interesting. When I look back, I'm glad I experienced it. Like, really glad I experienced it. And I'm glad I live where I do in the valley, and so far it's a nice quiet valley. I mean, it's getting more and more people. When I walk around some of these roads, I remember there were no houses here, no houses there. but it's getting built
Built
up
up.
pretty good. Yeah, so. And we used to go fishing at the streams. I was not a good fisherman. I spent more time looking for arrowheads. And my brother would fish. And we used to go back to a place called the Pinnacle. Have you ever heard of Pinnacle? It's a really high outcropping. My uncle owned a dairy farm back there. And that, down over beneath it was Roaring Creek. And you could climb down over the front of it. And back in there, like, there was names chiseled in from the 1800s. And there's actually a picture of a stone, of a steam engine chiseled in the rock with all different names. Some of them were very old. And some were Molly's relation too, the Regals. I mean, you climb down over this cliff and you could walk the sledge underneath these outcroppings, and like, it was like a special area. And there's an old mine back there we found with another friend. And I think Van Wagner looked for it one time and he found it, but because we knew where it was when we was kids, and we'd go in, but there was water and we didn't know how deep it was. And I think back in there was uranium and copper, because Van Wagner had a Geiger counter. It would go off in there. Interesting, very interesting place. And down below that, there was a flats where Molly's dad, he was a historian, Graydon Regal, and he would tell me about they used to call it the oil flats, because they used to raise flax and make oil out of down there someplace, which is pretty cool. Go ahead.
I guess I should tell you that I live in the original homestead of our family. I'm the fourth generation. And it was my great-grandparents that lived there that, thinking of some of Dan's stories, they had, they did butchering, and they had a dairy herd, and they had a cream separator, so they would bring the milk in, put it in the cream separator, separate the cream. They made butter, and they smoked meats in the shanty, which was connected to the house. And he took a lot of his wares, the butter, the meat, over to the coal regions to feed the miners. The miners would buy what he had as far as fresh meats and eggs and butter. And it was a lot of hard work, but that's how they made their living. And so there were many things when I moved to the house, there were many things in the basement that they had a special sausage grinder that they could grind the sausage and it went into a casing. And they had the cream separator was still there, and there was a hand-dug, there still is a hand-dug well in the basement, which it didn't sustain the farm, so they had to drill another well. But the well is still there, we don't use it, and the beams that the house is constructed of were someone that built coal mines over in the coal regions, built the frame of the house, so it's a very sturdy home, very well made, and it's still standing in good condition since 1854. And that's the first year I could trace it back to, and that was probably the first year they started paying taxes, and there was a record kept. So we think the home was there longer, but there's no record of it being there, or deed or anything like that. But it's an old Victorian farmhouse, and it's where we live, and we love it. A lot of memories there. Every once in a while we hear something and think of, is it a ghost? Is someone coming back to visit us? And it very well could be. Someone is still rattling around there.
Yeah, and all those old farms too, most of them had a nice house. There's one at our farm that's still there, a nice house. And out the road, there was a farm I used to work for, it had an ice house that's really neat. And they'd cut all this ice and put it in there. And it would last like most of the summer because all the walls were lined with sawdust. And they'd take the milk out there and put them in little areas underneath the ice. And I think there was an ice dam. Well, I know there was, like in Catawissa, when you go over River Hill, and back of Nussey's farm, You can't see it from the road.
Oh, yeah.
There's a Ice
But
House
also-
Road, isn't
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
And just back in there, we used to cut ice and sell ice. So it's kind of a neat area too, how you had to live back then. It wasn't like going to the refrigerator and there's an ice cube. Like that. So, but there's a lot of stories there to tell about. You think, try to bring them all up, you know.
I think the house that I live in was one of the first homes built in the valley, and it was one of the first homes to have electricity through a generator, and also indoor plumbing, because I don't ever remember seeing an outhouse. I know where the outhouse was located because there's things that we find like around, if we're digging in the dirt, we find like broken pottery, and things that they normally didn't have like a dump or a trash man, so they would just throw it down in the outhouse hole. And so at times we have found different artifacts. I guess you could call them well preserved.
Is there a lilac bush there?
Yes. And there was a beautiful lilac bush next to where the outhouse was.
Do they always?
There was always a,
Always
yeah, there was always a lilac bush by an outhouse
Yeah.
for some
Yeah,
reason.
oh, what happened to ours?
Well, I understand
I
why.
don't
Yeah.
either.
For the smell, it helped kept the smell away.
I know, made it nice.
They're over there.
My grandparents came from Poland. They met here in the United States, but they built their home in the Roaring Creek Valley, out near the Culp Church, out in that area. And they had a big farm. They raised 10 kids there.
Wow.
They walked to school down, you know. And then they had a store also in Mount Carmel, a meat and grocery store kind of thing, where they sold their meats and other groceries. I love growing up in this valley. We got to see it all the time. My dad built ponds all over the valley.
He built our pond.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, I'm finding more and more.
I remember his bulldozer.
Yes, you know, well, I remember, you know, while he's building those ponds, that's the things you did in the evening. You kind of went to watch Dad build ponds, you know, and, you know, he'd be going like this, and I'd be like not wanting to look, you know, it was scary. But, yeah, and they're all still, you know, they're all still there. I love that my grandson, who's 13, loves to go fishing and loves to be in the creeks and, you know, in the area. My oldest son has bought many farms over the years, and he's a big-time farmer. And he did some conservation work on the one farm. He got an award for of some sort, changing the waterway to make it safer from maybe the cows, kind of thing. And he just recently built a pond, which, you know, just kind of was my heart, you
Yeah.
know. But like you said about, if you go somewhere, it is so nice just to come back.
Always
the
good to
valley.
come back home.
Always that, when you know, and my mom used to say that, she used to say, oh, in the summer, we got to go to vacation in Mount Carmel. She said, I couldn't wait to come home and back up over that mountain. And so she came up over the, you know, Aristus Mountain, that last, from Weiser, back up into the valley, and she could see the valley. She was a happy camper. So a lot of good memories.
I remember I learned to swim on one of your dad's ponds that he built my.
I
on our
did
farm.
too. They tried to teach my mom to swim that way, my dad and his brother, and they threw her in,
Oh.
and she has never looked at, like even when the kids swam in the pool, she'd turn her chair and talk to me this way, you know, she couldn't get anywhere near water, but all the kids swam in the ponds,
Yeah.
and, you know, but that was lots of fun. Yeah.
Snakes would be swimming in one end, you'd go in the other.
Oh, what I hated was the fish biting your feet. That was just, you know. And as, you know, I remember going out, well, past where you live, Mary Rose, heading out towards the mountain, to pick potatoes. Me and the Egger twins and
Oh
my
my
brother.
gosh.
We were gonna go pick potatoes. Now, understand, my brother was always into this. We were not. Okay, this was our big adventure. Well, at noon, when we stopped for lunch, me and the Egger twins walked home. We had had enough picking potatoes. That was it. But, and I did learn to drive a tractor when I started dating my, well, now ex-husband, so they could throw hay on, you know, and that way, you know, there weren't enough people. So you drive the you drive a tractor? You learn fast.
Yeah, you
You
do.
learn
That was
fast.
always my, drive the truck, drive the truck.
So another interesting thing, getting off that subject, like was all the little general stores that was in the area.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, there were so many small general stores. One always sticks out is like called Harry Ralph's store,
Yep.
which is on Ashton Hollow. We used to go in there as a kid. He was a constable. He always had a badge and a gun laying on his desk. And he had anything you wanted, from blue jeans to shotguns,
Ice
to
cream.
anything you could buy. And he always was such a, he looked like a Norman Rockwell. He should have been on a Norman Rockwell print.
Yeah.
Man. And he had this long bench. It was cut there. It was probably like, oh God, it was probably like 12 feet long. And it was just the bark was off, but it was so smooth from people like sliding up and down on it with the knot holes and all that in. And then the one end, I always remember, like, my dad would always hang his hat there. There was a metal post, but it was like stick your hat and stuff like that. But you go down there, and they would, at the stores, like all the farmers would meet and just talk and talk. And then we had a store in a small village called Fisherdale. There's one by Southern Area High School called Red Star Store.
There was one in the media.
The one in
There
the
was the
median.
post office too.
There's one in Middle Road, Clarence Kreischer's
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
One in Bear Gap. I mean, one in Mill Grove. There was one in Mill Grove. This old picture here behind Mary Rose, this one building here, that's like Mill Grove. Bagnell did it print, right? And that used to be an old store. And supposedly the building across was a livery stable.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the house, I took piano lessons in that house.
Oh,
Oh, really?
Yeah, for years.
And then there was an old feed mill out there too.
Uh-huh.
That we used to take to feed them ground by water. And the old, and down by Ralph's old store was an old feed mill that ran by water. Used to know, because I remember as a kid, I used to watch him pull the ropes up. Tells how old I am. I'm
Exactly.
not 100 yet, but, no. But we grew up in a town where things went slow. I mean, area where things were slow, you know. But it was really cool how all that worked. If you go up Ashton Hollow, look to the right where the guy plants his garden, that's where it used to be the dam for the windmill, for the mill, where they kept the water that run through them. So, but yeah, I used to love going to those stores when you were a kid. But they don't exist either. I always thought if I was a multimillionaire, I'd buy a general store and open it. If I didn't make any money, I don't care. It'd be fun.
Just for the fun.
Politics, how many years?
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Just make it a chat
Took
place.
the Youngs,
Yeah.
But they were fun.
and and they all sold everything that
Yeah.
you could need.
It was like a treat to go there, because you always
Yeah.
get something good when your parents buy you something. That was exciting.
And Harry used to trade.
There used to be one in Slabtown, Fee's General
Yeah.
Store.
Yeah,
They sold everything and anything you wanted.
yeah.
Yeah.
and there was a mill there in
Yeah.
Slabtown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an old
Slabtown.
grist mill.
Martin's,
Yeah.
yeah, ran it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were neat to go in those old mills back then. You see the old cogs, wooden cogs, and whatever they could use. It's just amazing how much force they had to turn those huge rocks to grind. And there used to be an old mill when you go over Roaring Creek right before you get to Southern Area High School. Like there used to be a mill there that we went to, it was Barnaker's Mill, Barnaker's.
Yeah.
And that was run by Waterway back then, because I remember we had to walk in to get the feed. And there was a little walkway where you'd walk over the water where the mill race was, and it was like, it was just kind of cool doing that.
Cool.
Yeah. If I could turn back time, I would.
So would I, because my grandkids need to just be kids, you know? There's always something going on. Just get to be kids. But my grandson, he takes every minute he can to go fishing or help with the tractor, help
Yeah.
my son farm, which is surprising to me. Yeah.
And it was so neat back then, you went to a little church in the country, they had little churches all over, and everyone knew everyone, so it was so personal, one-on-one.
Hey,
You
we
got to know
still
people.
have that little church in the valley.
Yeah.
in the
There's
slab
one.
town.
Yeah, there's a lot of them around back
Yeah,
then.
now everybody stabs each
Yeah.
other in the back.
Yeah,
And
not so
that
much.
was-
We
that was good when you were a kid.
Yeah.
You had your Sunday school picnics where you played in the
Yeah.
sawdust pile, they throw toys and candy.
Yeah, I remember that, it was fun.
A lot of memories when you start thinking. And what's sad, a lot of the older people that passed away, like Molly Regal's dad was a historian, her grandfather, they knew so much history, and it's gone because no one really captured or wrote it down like it was supposed to be. You know, like Catawissa was a great area one time, self-sufficient town. They had shoe factories, railroad car repair, just amazing. So yeah. What else is right?
That's some good history.
Yeah.
Yeah, good memories.
But still, when I walk around or bike around, you never goes away. The memory's always there, which is good.
What was there?
Yeah, which is very good. So yeah, I'm kind of like winding down here a little bit. What do you want to throw in there? Anyone else want to throw something in? Like,
Well, I just want to suggest that the two of you collaborate. You write down your stories and let Mary illustrate them, and Mary, you write down your stories and let Dan illustrate or add to them. It would be wonderful to have
Well, I never-
of the valley.
Yeah,
write a
right
book.
together.
I was never put on the spot to. I didn't know I was going to be doing this tonight. I thought, oh, you're kidding. I'm not like a outgoing
You did a
speaker.
great job, Dan.
Great job, Dan.
Oh, you too.
Thank you.
So.
Better you than me.
But yeah, it's kind of like, what do you do now? You just stick with the memories and live with the flow, I guess. Go with the flow now. Not much you can do. But at least the memories are there. And a lot of kids, like you said, they'll never experience what you did when you were young like that.
Back in the 1900s.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, we were walking through a cemetery the other day and looking at some of the old dates, and you think, wonder what those people thought back then if they could, did they think they're going to grow up and one day they're going to pass away? I wonder what kind of history they had. They don't have what we have, but you think, what was in their mind? Like at 19 years old, you probably think you're never going to die. You live forever, and one day you're back to dust. And
It makes you wonder, how did they get here? Like covered wagon or
Yeah.
refuge from the Indians? Or were they friends with the Indians? There's a lot of questions unanswered.
I know. That's why whenever I'm in a field, I'm always looking for arrowheads and thinking, wonder what this guy thought, what his train of thought was who made this arrow. It's very interesting. He wasn't thinking about paying the electrical bill or the phone bill or,
He thought, I have
Yeah.
to eat tonight.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. But yeah, Warren, I think, there's tons of stuff to talk about, but
I hope we gave you some good.
yeah.
This is fantastic. I have one more story to
Okay.
share.
Oh.
You mentioned Knoebels.
Yes.
So Knoebels this year turns 100.
Right.
Yes.
100th anniversary. And in this little idyllic paradise of a valley, there's an amusement park that at least before COVID was getting 1.5 million people. So something huge here. But as huge as it is, it's also a wholly homegrown place. And the family who runs it, we all know them. At the Moose Building, there were a couple of times when the Knoebel family brought the grandchildren to bowl. They did a birthday party in the bowling alley there. And I got to meet Dick Knoebel and his sons, Rick and Brian. Whenever I did any sort of party there, I would always bring everybody back to show them the thin spotting machine. And here comes Dick Knoebel, who probably comes up to about here on you. And he comes in and he looks at all these machines, and you can see he's starting to get interested. And his sons are like, Dad, you don't have time for this. We need you at the park. I was there just a few Saturdays ago. I went with some friends. They came up from Lancaster County. We show up right when the park opens at noon. We sit in one of the pavilions. We, of course, have brought our own food because Knoebels doesn't make you buy their food. They don't make you pay to get in. You can just come in and walk around.
You don't have to pay to park.
You don't have to pay to park. We walk in, And there's a whole crowd of people from, I think it was a church group, I'm not sure if they were local or from outside the area. And they're all getting their day passes. And who's handing them the passes but Brian Knoebel? The guy who runs the place is doing the work.
Oh, yeah.
That is the ethos that this whole valley has. This is a place where the people know each other, and the guy all the way up here and the person all the way down here, well, they're not actually that far apart. That's tremendously important, and it's one of the reasons that we love that park. It's not corporate, it's us. It's so important that we tell our stories, so as you said, the kids growing up today don't have those same experiences that you had, that I had. There are still things in this area that they can experience. They will tell their grandchildren about Knoebels, and they will tell their grandchildren the stories that you have told them and that we have shared here. So thank you very much for sharing.
Now,
So,
one
can I
more
mention
thing.
one more
Yes, yes,
thing?
yes,
One more
please.
thing too then. That's kind of like,
You first.
no, go ahead. No, this is like a little bit of like spooky history maybe too. You know what I mean?
Oh, then
Yeah.
let me tell mine
Okay, no,
because I don't want to be afraid.
go ahead. No, it's not that bad.
Well, Knoebel started with a covered bridge that they used to jump off and go swimming in the creek. And that's one thing Columbia County is known for, to have, I don't know how many, but
20.
20 covered bridges left, and it's like a bridge to the past, when you
Yep.
can go on a covered bridge.
Yep.
If you're going to work and you cross a covered bridge, it makes you feel good about going to work, or calm of coming home at night. It's just a good feeling to know, thinking back in history about the covered bridges. That's my take.
You know, I remember Pete Knoebel telling me one time, years ago when he was a kid, down by the Knoebels, they'd see these like orbs bouncing around up in the hillsides, but no one knew what they were, like lights. And I remember that. And then I started asking around the neighborhood. My one lady who lives out the road, she said, oh yeah, we'd see those too. They didn't know what they were, like just like a light going across the field. But then we come to think like maybe they were the miners that used to walk the miners' trail from Ashland over at night, and they come home to do their chores in the daytime and stuff like that. You know, which is, they call them spooks or something like that. Never knew what they were. I always thought that was kind of cool, but that was from, Dick told me he saw them down there, I remember.
That always amazed me, though. We did that miner's trail from Napoli back over to Bear Gap Road to one time, at night, in the dark.
Oh, my.
Yeah,
Without
It
the
was-
lanterns,
yeah, with just
With
with
little
headlights.
the
headlights
lightning
on it.
bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I barely made it the last stretch, but I did it, but there was people there, I don't know how they did it, they had no clue what they were getting into. But how the miners did that every morning
And
and
then go home
every
and
night
farm.
is beyond me.
Well, it's not as dark there as it is down underground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how about it?
Yeah.
But I mean, to
They've
walk
adjusted
that
it.
far back and forth twice a day to
Every
go
day.
to work and come
Yeah.
back home, it's like, oh my
And
God.
there's an old airplane still, parts still laying
Yeah.
over there in the mountain. I don't know if you
It
ever saw it or
crashed.
not.
Yeah.
It crashed.
Remember back in the early 60s or something?
I'm not that old.
But I remember going to it a couple of times. I don't know why, I was always fascinated. But I remember going to it several times, and the wings and stuff is still there.
Yep.
That over by Wilburton.
Now it's right
No.
over by Bear Gap.
Okay.
You know where Middle Road comes out towards, you know where Fisherdale is? Well, it's like if you go Fisherdale, turn right, and go a mile.
Okay.
It's up on top of the mountain halfway in there.
Let's hike it sometime.
Yeah,
Or invite
if you go
Oren.
to Miners Trail and go across the top, you can look down and see it.
We're doing it during the day or at night?
And
Night.
Okay.
Isn't that on some
No.
of Abby's relatives' ground?
it could be, or
I
they-
think, 'cause she goes hunting over there and said you, in her tree stand, you'd hear it creaking.
yeah, so it's
Oh.
good, because everyone was
And stuff.
deceased that was there,
Oh, my.
including
Oh,
their
yeah.
dogs, you know.
We should go
Yeah,
during the
no,
day so you
really.
can see it.
Yeah, it's kind of
Some her
interesting.
relations.
It's
Because I remember
great.
my dad had to go out and block the roads
Ah,
tonight, because people were going up stealing pieces off of it back then, you know?
Yeah,
Wow.
So,
that is spooky.
yeah.
I think daytime is probably the right time
Yeah.
or something like that.
I was always interested in seeing a ghost though. It would give me a different outlook on life, I think, if I actually saw a real
So-
ghost.
Tell your story about what you found going back for water testing the other winter.
Oh, the person who was lost.
Yeah,
We walked, it had snowed, and it was Mark Deibler and myself. We're going back on the, I guess it's the other side of 42, so I don't know what direction that would be.
Up towards Ringtown.
Up towards
Valley.
Ringtown, and so we walked in 4 miles, and we got to the headwaters, and we're holding the meter, testing the water, and we hear, "Hello, hello, I can't believe there's a person here."
Oh, no.
And it was probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, and someone had walked in the day before and got disoriented and lost. And he slept overnight, and it was freezing all night, so he was probably very cold, and he was so happy to see a person. And he said he knew his way out, but we asked him if he would walk with us, and so we walked him out. And then Mark drove him home, and I think we had the police do a welfare check, and he was fine. But he thought we saved his life because
well, he was in his 80s, right?
he was in his 80s.
Yeah, it snowed that night too.
Lord.
And it snowed, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were just lucky to be there at that time to find him, to get him out of the
Yeah,
woods.
who knows how long you'd have been there if you went that day.
Okay.
Well, when it snows.
One more little history thing.
Oh, go ahead.
One more little history thing. So, did anyone ever know here, and this is like, could be rumor, could be false, like there was supposedly gold found in Cleveland Township, like over the Esther Furnace Church. Like a friend of mine brought me an old Beers history book, and we opened it, and there was a place called the Simon Shive Place, a house right across the covered bridge, a furnace there.
Yes.
So he said there was gold found there, and how much it was worth a ton back then, gold and silver. So we did find an old mine below the church there went back. But in back of this house, there's a huge wall higher, like twice as high as this, and as long. And it's nothing but quartz going up through. You can see where they had blasted it off, because they took chips off of it. And, and I thought that's kind of interesting too. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But then I walked to our neighbors one time. Her name was Mrs. Luby. She's like in her 90s. I said, "Did you ever hear about gold being found here?" She said, "We don't have to go that far to find gold, because we found traces of over in her land going into Harold Getty's Hall, supposedly." And then Molly's dad said out by a small town, I don't know what the town that is before you go up the mountain, up toward the Mystic Mountain. There's this, where the Vans have a store.
Yes.
Roadstown.
Yeah, there was traces of gold there found one time, they said. I thought that was in it. Whether it's true, I don't know. But it was kind of interesting. So, just a little history.
Gravity Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, close to that. Yeah, there's a Gravity Hill out there. Did you ever go to that?
I've only heard of it.
Okay, you have to try it out. Have a couple beers before you.
Okay.
That's all I have to say for tonight.
Thank you.
That'd be
Good.
good.
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
We'll see you again here.
July 3rd.
Around me, just helping the tear to pass. Helping the tear to pass. Helping the tear to pass.